The intrusion. In late January of 1999, Pakistani troops in small numbers started coming across LOC. The bulk of the Pakistanis, in order to avoid detection, joined the rest in April and together advanced further within Indian side of LOC. Most of the troops sent were from the Northern Light Infantry, a paramilitary force made up of men from Baltistan who could adapt to high altitudes easier than other troops. They built sangars, shelters of loose rock, to avoid being detected by Indian surveillance helicopters. Indian intelligence failure. By May, Pakistan had ingressed up to 8 kilometers deep and across a distance of 136 kilometers from west to east. Pakistan had taken advantage of the heavy winter snow, which made patrolling difficult for Indian troops. Pakistan had sent between 1,500 to 2,000 troops along with a large number of porters. Contrary to the popular belief, India had not withdrawn forces from its high-altitude positions, but India was simply too complacent. Indian patrolling parties patrolled only the tracks and ravines, and that too halfway to the LOC. Indian initial reaction. By May 1999, news was trickling in of intrusion, but Indian Army assumed the intruders to be mujahideen as the Pakistani troops were in civilian clothes. Such was the lack of alarm that the then Chief of the Army, General V.P. Malik, left for a pre-scheduled visit to Poland and the Czech Republic on May 10, 1999. On May 14, an Indian patrolling party was captured by the Pakistanis. India dispatched troops to the mountains without proper equipment, clothing and acclimatization. They were easily repelled after taking heavy casualties. For the first 2 weeks, Indian troops had no close air support as the Air Force refused to commit attack helicopters to back up ground troops. From their vantage point above Dras, Pakistani troops directed artillery fire from their side of the LOC to the road below on Indian side of the LOC. This road linked the Kashmir Valley to Leh. Early challenges. Pakistani troops were armed with AK-47s, machine guns, mortars, anti-aircraft guns and Stinger surface-to-air missiles, and were supported from behind by Pakistani artillery. Indian troops were poorly equipped and poorly acclimatized, had to scale mountains with steep flanks under enemy fire due to almost none or very little cover. They could move forward only at night as the Pakistani artillery shelling during daytime was being accurately directed at Indian positions. Indian response. By late May, India adopted a twin approach. India decided to maintain restraint by not crossing the LOC and thereby reinforcing its argument that it is the victim and not aggressor. On the other hand, India had made it clear that India might at a later stage cross not just the LOC but also the international border. This Indian threat had frightened the international community, considering both countries were nuclear powers. The airstrikes began on May 26. The air operations were particularly difficult as the pilots had to stay within Indian side of LOC and therefore had to fly within narrow corridors in between high mountains. On May 27, India lost 2 planes and both fell the other side of the LOC. Both pilots ejected successfully, one was taken prisoner and released later while the other was tortured and killed. The next day a Mi-17 was shot down and the crew of 4 died. The helicopter operations were halted after this. Preparations for a broader war. Indian troops all along the LOC and international border were asked to switch to a state of readiness that would put India in a position to launch an offensive anywhere at 6 days' notice. India also sent its naval ships to Arabian Sea to send a message to Pakistan and international community that it was willing to expand the war if required. Indian pilots were careful to fly high enough to avoid Pakistani missiles. Indian aircraft were soon pummeling Pakistan's overstretched supply lines. Internationally, the airstrikes added to alarm about a widening conflict that might turn nuclear. Pakistan had longer supply lines across more difficult terrain than India. The unusually mild winter meant the Zojila, the pass between Kashmir and Ladakh, had opened earlier than usual, which helped India to bring in reinforcements and heavy artillery. Since the Kargil plan was not discussed with the Foreign Ministry, Pakistani ambassadors and Foreign Minister could not explain their stand. Pakistani journalists were not allowed near the war zone on their side and were told only mujahideen were involved. Diplomatic blackmail. Pakistani Foreign Minister Musharraf Aziz was sent to India in June to negotiate an end of war in exchange for a dialogue with Pakistan. Aziz was briefed by Pakistani military and was told not to agree to a ceasefire as that would allow India to move its vehicles on Dros-Kargil road. Aziz was asked to insist that there were no Pakistani troops involved and it was only mujahideen who were involved. Aziz was supposed to tell India that if India gave a reasonable deadline from the Kashmir issue to be resolved, Pakistan would persuade the mujahideen to withdraw. Musharraf Aziz Conversation intercepted. A day before Musharraf Aziz arrived in India, India released the intercepted conversation between General Musharraf and his Chief of General Staff Lieutenant General Muhammad Aziz Khan. General Aziz in the conversation could be heard saying that Pakistan would claim Indian airstrikes were hitting the Pakistani side of the LOC and therefore Pakistan was a victim. Aziz spoke of the BBC coverage of Indian airstrikes and both congratulated each other for being able to internationalize the Kashmir issue. Aziz also assured Musharraf that PM Nawaz Sharif was on board with the operation. India's first victory. By the first week of June, both Indian and Pakistani troops had taken high number of casualties due to artillery firing and airstrikes. India got its first major victory on June 13 when Indian troops managed to overrun Toliling Top after softening the enemy positions with a massive artillery barrage with at least 100 artillery pieces, mortars and rocket launchers. This was followed by 5 days of hand-to-hand fighting. It took another week for India to capture Point 5140, which was around 2 miles away from Toliling. International reaction. On June 16, Indian National Security Advisor Brajesh Misra told his American counterpart Sandy Berger that India might allow its troops to cross the Pakistani border. President Clinton authorized United States officials to inform media that Washington believed the intruders were Pakistani regulars and not mujahideen. The G8 nations asked the sanctity of the LOC to be restored. American intervention. On June 24, 25, General Anthony Zinni, commander of U.S. Central Command, visited Islamabad and asked Pakistan to withdraw from Kargil in exchange for a meeting between Clinton and Nawaz Sharif ending Pakistan's isolation after it conducted its nuclear tests. On June 28, Nawaz Sharif went to Beijing to consult its long-standing ally. China asked the Pakistanis to withdraw and resume dialogue in accordance with the spirit of Lahore Declaration. Sharif telephoned Clinton and asked for a meeting. The meeting was set for July 4. India in the meanwhile got another major victory by capturing Tiger Hill. Musharraf met Nawaz Sharif at the airport while he was leaving for US and he had broadly agreed with Nawaz that they should try for the best possible outcome but be ready to withdraw from Kargil. Nawaz-Clinton meet. Clinton told Nawaz Sharif if Pakistan decides to withdraw from Kargil, US would urge India to allow the withdrawal and would encourage a dialogue between both countries. If not, US would denounce Pakistan for starting the war. On top of that, Clinton would blame Pakistan for assisting Osama bin Laden and other terrorists. As Nawaz and Sharif were talking, U.S. National Security Advisor Sandy Berger relayed its progress to his counterpart in India Brajesh Misra. By the time the meeting ended, Sharif had promised to withdraw, and in return Clinton promised him that he would take personal interest in talks between India and Pakistan. Indian victory. Pakistan was not even able to secure a formal ceasefire. India and Pakistan agreed to an informal sector-by-sector ceasefire which quickly broke down. On June 26, India officially declared that the war had been won. India had lost 473 men and 1,006 were wounded. Pakistan continued with its fiction that only mujahideen were involved and never released the number of casualties. India estimated more than 700 Pakistani soldiers had lost their lives.